Well, welcome back, and time to get into conversation with a person who's with the chair of the Kenyan Beach Volleyball Commission and also works with the school game system in the country, Mr. Moses Budhia. Welcome back to Channel One. And for you, the first thing, I think the last 2 weeks have been some of the most storied. And I remember when we were starting the year with our Sports Check program, you spoke about the beach volleyball preparations for this round of qualification for the Rio Olympics. A travel advisory was issued by the government that if you have to go to a country which has reported a case of COVID-19, then it will not be allowed. So Nigeria was it. Now, that was last week for the women's team. We expected them to move to the final round of qualifying. The men's team, and by the way, you're supposed to be in Banjul, and you're in Nairobi right now. That's how strange it is.
Yes,
so you're supposed to have traveled with the men's team, but because Senegal reported a case, and if you've got to travel to the Gambia, then you've got to go through Dakar. That has happened. What's the impact of this on beach volleyball from the Olympic qualification front?
I think I like your knowledge of everything, the way you have analyzed it.
Oh, thank you.
I want to say here that as you've mentioned, as I'm talking to you, I should be calling you from Banjul in Gambia, telling you how the results were today. And you realize here that out of 5 teams, only 2 did participate. That is South Sudan and the host team, that is Gambia. And Gambia happened to be the defending champion of African Games. Yes, remember that. Now, maybe to go back to your question, because I think I got mesmerized by what you had already done. Unfortunately, you didn't put volleyball, that have also suspended all the activities, including yesterday's Cup Nairobi branch, where we ought to have had a Charles Nyamberi Cup, but we did, we had to move it, and we shall be announcing in due course. Let me get your question, because...
So the question is, what's the impact for beach volleyball, because we've missed qualification, and could there be a fallback for Kenya, because this is truly a case of what they call force majeure, an act of God in simple terms?
As you did mention at the beginning of this season, we were here and talked about the beach volleyball, and we said we were very prepared. We're going to prepare the teams, which we did. We did take these teams to Mombasa, a Pride Inn hotel, that is a Flamingo in Mombasa. And the girls and boys were putting up in the Dan Park Hotel. And they took a lot of time, went, qualified for the sub-zonal, that is in Uganda, and Dar es Salaam for men and women respectively. Thereafter, they were able to be put in the list of the whole continent, and they were distributed. The ladies were supposed to go to Nigeria, and that was last week, as you did mention. And the 5 countries, only 2 again did go to Abuja. And this is Nigeria, which is the host, and the DRC. The remaining countries didn't find their way there. And this has really affected the game of beach volleyball, because those teams that will qualify, whether Nigeria or DRC, they will not pass through that proper litmus paper. Because I remember we did meet Nigeria in Morocco, and we were able to beat them twice. So if there is a team that is going to qualify for the Olympic, that puts some question mark. Same with the beach volleyball men. That ought to have taking place right now in Banjul, that is in Gambia. And sorry to the wachezaji, the Kaundensia, the Oduoris, very unfortunate, but this is how the whole thing is.
Yes. So we've got to look at the protection of the athletes from a national point of view, because this, if I was to look at the protection of an athlete, then I would use the case of the 2010 Africa Cup of Nations in Angola, where Togo, the players were attacked, CAF issued sanctions, but when they went to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, it was overturned. And the question is, can the case of force majeure or an act of God because of this pandemic be applied such that the final qualification for this by the Confederation of African Volleyball in collaboration with the IOC and the FIVB include teams whose travel was restricted by their national governments?
I do not speak for them, but between you and I, you know very well that it will be a very dilute championship in Gambia. And If I was sitting at the helm of a CAVB, I would take a back seat and make sure that I view everything from the screen and ask myself, what do we want to achieve as a continent of Africa? And if the time allows, the three teams for the women and the men should also be given a chance. But as you've said, the health of our athletes is paramount. And as an elder here, I was not dying to go to Gambia, because we have to look at why did the government think of that. And holistically, we look at it from all angles. Yes, it is a problem, but from your point of argument, it is true that those games will be diluted, and we shall not give our best to the Olympics, particularly in the beach.
Well, I mentioned earlier at the start of the interview is that Moses Mudia comes here, and also at the start of the bulletin, that it's not every time that you come and face one person whose activities are hit twice, not once, but twice, by the same pandemic, the COVID-19 virus. And from the statement issued by the Ministry of Health is that school games have been stopped. It's term one, and there is a whole load of issues. We are only in March, and we're getting to it, so we should be getting the county level, heading towards the nationals. And for you, how heavily has this affected the school games calendar, especially for term one, knowing that, considering that I'll pick up some games, basketball, I'll pick up hockey, I'll pick up, I think, heptathlon and deca, and then take a look at these athletes. And for those in Form 4, going through, say, the 844 system, this is probably the end of their sporting career in high school. And it's just been stopped. I mean, the conditions are crazy.
I wouldn't actually look at myself as a policy maker, because you have our Dr. Mutisia, who is our patron from Jogo House, who is actually following everything to the letter. And the Secretary General, David Gugi, you and I know that this week they were in Kakamega inspecting the grounds for the East African Games.
To be held later in September.
Yes. And I would quietly shelf that, but also look at it the way you are looking at it. That the term one games, because we follow a calendar, Nairobi County, which has about 11 sub-counties, was supposed to be having their games on. And our regional games were supposed to start from today yesterday up to Sunday. That will not take shape. The impact, as you're putting it, is just like it happened in 1988, when the national games under the minister, Aurora Ringo, said no nationals. I was a student, A-level, I had won Nairobi, and I was with my bag at the railway station on my way to Kisumu, and lunchtime announcements, no nationals.
That was on VOK.
I'll never forget that. Now, I can now come back to our own students right now. The top athletes, the top hockey player, the top basketballer this year, the one who was aiming at getting the position of MVP, it's been affected. But this is a global issue. So much has been affected. I think what you're supposed to be doing is trying to look at what can happen should the government, for example, lift the ban. Can we try to sit down and see whether we could, through, we call it Kyundudo, through further methods we have the teams assembled and then go for nationals, if the time will allow.
This is a question, and look, going back in time, is that games, especially nationals, used to be played during the holidays. And the question is, the whole concept of trying to put the COVID-19 factor under control is avoiding crowds. So is it possible that probably the term one games could take place over the April holidays, like used to happen way back?
They were even supposed to take place during the April holidays.
Yes.
What we have now is the preparation for the nationals. The nationals are supposed to take place.
So we're looking at the regionals and nationals.
For the national to take place, there should be the sub-county, the county, and the regional games. But that has been put X. And as we have said, as managers, we ask ourselves, is it good for the student? It's good for the country? And I think down in the heart of the policymakers, they mean well. Because as you've said, if we can have an epidemic in this country and then be blamed as the managers who did take the young ones to the games, then
the repercussions are heavy.
We'll even go back to what we said, 1988, that I didn't go, but I'm alive. I did not die because I did not go for nationals then in 1988.
And the other one that would come into play, and this is what I would like to look at, because we've got to consider this. Kenya is hosting the East Africa Games. And Kenya is, I'm looking at Tanzania, I'm looking at Uganda. They use what's a calendar system that's used outside the country. Think of a calendar system, education system that runs ideally from September to May. In Kenya, we use the calendar year. So how do we balance for some of these Kenyan sports, young men and women who want to shine at the regional games at home in Kakamega County?
I think I would answer it. You said something during your preamble that in 1973, there were activities that were taking place in the world. There was the Yankee Pool
the October 6th War.
The October 6th War. And the fuel did shoot up. The aviation industries were affected. And out of that, so many countries were able to do their exploration and they started mining their own oil. Had it not been for the crisis then, countries would not have been able to come up with a solution. I believe as policymakers, we shall be able to sit and come up with a solution and even put a policy that in future, should this thing happen, how do we go about it? So we have good thinkers in this country and they'll sit down and come up with a solution to this effect.
Well, Mr. Moses Mbuthia, I know this conversation can go on, and thank you very much. I only have one question for you. Shall we overcome this?
There is nothing impossible. There is totally nothing impossible. We shall be able to overcome this. I am reliably informed now that China have already started doing their work. The steamships are in the high seas. And if the epicenter is going down, who are we not to be optimistic?
Then he's simply saying we are unbogable. Well, Moses Mbuthia, who is the chair of the Beach Volleyball Commission of the Kenya Volleyball Federation, and he's also involved in the school games, for a person who's been affected in two fronts, not able to take two teams to qualification for the Olympic Games. That is the beach volleyball men's team to Nigeria last week, and the women's team rather to Nigeria last week, and the men's team to the Gambia this week, and the school games having been postponed. Well, we will keep tabs on what's happening around COVID-19 and sport. We want to see the action back. And for the ladies, I know you're all happy to have the men home early tonight, with the exception of I and Mr. Moses Mbuthia and our team here.
I hope my wife is not listening.
No, she's watching. She knows you're at work. At least she knows where you are.
Okay.
Yeah? But I want to wish you all a very good evening. On behalf of the team that put together this bulletin, I want to wish you a good night. Our sign language interpreter has been Lucy Maura. My co-anchor was Edward Kabasa. Be blessed.